2010 to 2019 has been a very weird decade for everybody, myself included, and strategy games are no different, from having stuff like Command & Conquer 4 to Command & Conquer Rivals, Dawn of War 3, and all the disappointing releases in between. It was sort of a very tough decade for strategy games, but we did have some killer releases come in and some very pivotal games that have pushed the strategy game genre to its limits, and something that I want to see more of coming into 2020. But my name is Masterofroflness, and welcome to my top strategy games of the decade. So we're going to go through each year, starting with 2010. So 2010 was a very interesting year. We got ourselves one of the greatest strategy games to come out, that being Starcraft 2, and one of the worst, that being Command & Conquer 4. Very interesting time period. CNC 4 has been very much an orange sheep in the community, something that should not be talked about or discussed. And while it has a lot of interesting ideas, I think it does fall flat in the story department, gameplay department, and really trying to harken back to what makes people like Command & Conquer in the first place, which is the mixture of base building and real-time strategy combat, which is something that CNC4 really lacked in one extreme department. The mechs could have been cool, but maybe if they were repurposed as something that was more like the MCV of what we're used to, and less like a I don't know how to describe it besides a Total War style where you have a set amount of units and then you can only build those set amount of units. And I really wasn't a fan of the differences between the three mech types in particular. StarCraft 2, on the other hand, opposite complaints, great story, great campaign, great multiplayer, and amazing arcade support. CNC4 has actually terrible mod support, which is why nobody mods CNC4. They actually take the models from CNC4 and they put it into Red Alert 3, for example. So that's something of the legacy of CNC4 last. And Civilization 5, which I don't even need to explain, honestly. It's the best Civilization. Civilization 6 might be better, but you do need the DLCs for that. I think there's a little bit too much DLCs for that game. 2011, nothing crazy happened except the greatest Total War game came out, which is Shogun 2. Shogun 2 and Fall of the Samurai included with this are amazing fucking games that take place within the feudal time period of Japan, and I absolutely love this because I'm not a big Japaneseophile, but the way that the mechanics work, especially with the end game content, with you having to deal with literally half of Japan going after you, is just brilliant. And I honestly, like, the best way for you to take an overpowered player and still stack him with more challenges that goes on in the campaign. And I like to see more games employ this level of, like, end game, oh, the human player is conquering 40 settlements, let's throw something his way that'll really stop him, like the Mongols in Medieval 2 Total War. I feel like some of this is portrayed in Attila and Warhammer, but really I think Shogun 2 is a very polished game, and considering it's only one culture, one area, very small area, maybe it was able to be more focused. I'd love for Saga to be like this, but currently Saga is taking place in territories that I genuinely don't care about. So maybe if they were to take place in more obscure areas, that would be like much better. But personally, I find Shogun 2 to be way better than what came after it, Rome 2, and then much better than Attila. I think Warhammer kind of returns the stride a little bit. Haven't played Three Kingdoms, so I wouldn't know, but Shogun is definitely my favorite. 2012 was pretty easy. Sins of a Solar Empire and Rebellion as well as Trinity, if you got those DLCs. It's an incredible game, 4x massive scale real-time strategy combat with the interesting technology sort of researching and development like Civilization, especially 5, 6 a little bit different, but still, regardless, the amount of detail that was in this 4x game is humongous, and this is from a company that really, at the end of the day, are just nobodies in comparison to people like Paradox and Blizzard that we talk about. These guys were able to make an incredible game, and I would love to see a return to Sins of a Solar Empire Rebellion, especially with our current systems and stuff. Something that makes me have to upgrade my computer and remove all my parts and take out a $3,000 loan. Something that could really make me homeless. And I think Sins of Solar Empire 2 would be satisfying that very big itch that I have for a 4x type of real-time strategy combat. You don't get a lot of those. Nothing like the Rise of Nations and the Empire Earths that we're used to. So I do find Sins of the Solar Empire to be a sci-fi version of that return to form. Epic units, epic multiplayer maps, modding support. There's a lot of reasons why I still play even Sins of the Solar Empire still. Okay, 2013 is a bit of a tie. We got Europa, we got Planetary Annihilation, we got Code 2. If I had to pick one that's better, I would have to say Europa if they were able to consolidate the DLCs and not make you have to pay $500 to play the base game. And then Planetary Annihilation, maybe. There's just a lot of issues with Planetary Annihilation even nowadays in terms of performance, in terms of the gameplay balance. Personally, for me, I was an early backer, and I have been very disappointed by the way the game has shaped up, especially during its final release. So it's a little bit disappointing, but the game is still being worked on. In fact, they just added in a new unit. So if you do like sci-fi orbital stuff, that is the superior game. But really, for me, when it comes down to content on release, Code 2 is probably the best of these options. Great multiplayer, modding support. Now we've got pretty good modding support, but it could be better. And in addition to this, the campaign, while divisive and way too Western orientated, I found the Ardennes campaign to be the better one. Probably skip the Soviet one, it's a little bit trash. This one I was genuinely stuck on. We got Rise of Nations Extended Edition, which I'm not really a big fan of definitive or extended editions. Just make a new game. But you know what? We don't have a lot of Rise of Nations, and because I get to see the remaster of an old game that I couldn't normally otherwise get. I remember beforehand I would have to torrent or download the game or get a disc copy from some guy in Swahili land, and it's pretty hard. But now I can just play it on Steam. And then we have Endless Legend, which I feel is a better civilization. More realized factions, more unique factions that play into their mechanics overall, and that's something that I love about Amplitude, is that they really made a more honed in experience. You don't have one separate unique building and one unique unit and maybe like an ability. Your whole race is just fundamentally different. You would eat dust, for example, which is the gold resource. Imagine eating just raw gold ignites. That's basically what one of the factions do, and a lot of the factions kind of feel similar in that vein. Civilization doesn't really have that too much. You do see some of that in Civ 6. But really, Endless Legend goes the distance, and I would love to see an Endless Legend 2 to maybe even push it even further. But Humankind is what we're going to be seeing soon enough, so I can't wait to see what Amplitude does in 2020. 2015 was a pretty bad year, I'm not going to lie. I remember recording on this year, and it was god-awful. We had pretty whack RTS games. But out of that came Grey Goo and Homeworld Remastered. Homeworld Remastered, if you love Homeworld 1 and 2, you're going to love this. It's basically the exact same thing. For those who don't know, Homeworld is a 3D space RTS where you command spaceships to blow each other up. It's fantastic. Grey Goo, on the other hand, is an original content property made by the same guys who made the Command & Conquer series, some of them, the Petroglyph Studios. And these games made a sci-fi universe, a sci-fi game, where it apes kind of off of Starcraft. Kind of. There's 3 different factions. They're fighting against this unseen 4th faction, actually, that you can play as later on, and they did give that out for free, which is pretty dope. And because of this, a lot of people gave it flack, and didn't really have a lot of map content post-release as well as modding support, but it had crazy ideas. You had a Goo faction that could absorb units, move on the fly, and transform into whatever unit it needed. You have a South African sort of District 9 parody faction where they all talk in South African accents and have like this big old diesel punk giant guns motif. We got the humans who are the sci-fi super advanced people. A little bit of a reverse. Usually it's the aliens, now it's the humans. And it's pretty cool in that regard. The campaign is pretty weak sauce, I won't lie. Cinematics look fantastic. I think they got the same guys as the Halo Wars 2 cinematic team. So that is saying something, but it didn't really pan out that well. I did end up liking Homeworld Remastered a lot more, but Grey Goo I wish I liked more. I wish I liked more. If I were to give it more love in Grey Goo 2, I would definitely say more maps and modding support is definitely needed post afterwards. But the factions themselves, while being aesthetically more realized, I find them to be not as cool as, let's say, the Starcraft 2 factions were, or not as different as them, let's say, except for the Goo race. But Homeworld Remastered, very easy. That's my pick right there for 2015. 2016, I feel like I'm cheating because I picked Ashes of the Singularity, made by the guys who made Sins of a Solar Empire Rebellion, and I picked Homeworld Deserts of Kharak. So I'm cheating. I'm sorry. Ashes of the Singularity is a very simple game. It's basically, what if you wanted thousands of units and fry your PC? And that's what it does, all in one video game, all in one match session. You have tens of thousands of units going in, and a lot of the game is just basically a test to see if you could survive. If you've ever played Nexus Wars, it's similar to that. There's tug of war gameplay where you have one army pushing against the other and hard counters like changing up your unit strategies, increasing your production, switching over to different unit types like air units. That's a way for you to gain small advantages to push the tide forward, and you can see that there's a lot of units. Now, for me at the very least, I didn't really think it was as detailed as Sins of a Solar Empire Rebellion, and because these guys were part of that same parent company, I kind of expected a little bit more. But you know what? Honestly, overall though, I have to say that when I did play it, I was impressed, and I was even more impressed by Ashes of Singularity Escalation, which just increases things more and adds in even more higher tiers of units that you could fight against and use on the battlefield and spam out, which is great. Just more and more insanity being poured into it. Homeworld vs. Kharak, however, is interesting because I hated the story. It was so stupid. But the gameplay was orgasmic. I love being able to cross giant sand dunes and fight off against like different sand buggies using the terrain tactically. That's something that I don't see a lot of, how a terrain will influence an RTS battle. You know, because usually sometimes it's small, it's very small. But in this Kharak, it's really increased to a massive degree because of things like line of sight and the sand dunes blocking that line of sight. Also increasing and decreasing movement and speed. It's a phenomenal game. It's a phenomenal looking game. It's just personally for me, the story just didn't really pan out for me too well. I like there to be if there were new units or a lot more units because I felt like the unit roster was pretty small. But in terms of a gorgeous experience, it's something that I can keep playing constantly. This is a kharak is for me, honestly. If 2015 and 2016 were pretty much barren wastelands, then 2017 was really the bountiful oasis that we needed. Halo Wars 2, Dawn of War 3, Tooth and Tail. So let's get the ugly sheep out of the way. Dawn of War 3. Cool ideas, really bad execution. I felt like they tried to balance Dawn of War 1 and Dawn of War 2, and they got the worst of both of them. They really need to go with one or the other here. And I think like if they made 2 games, it wouldn't have been so bad. Or maybe at the very least, you could shave it off so that it really is only the good parts of Dawn of War 1 and Dawn of War 2. Alas, I think like these clashes really messed things up. The community didn't really like the game at the start, which I didn't really care about the lore problems. But I did care about the gameplay being really boring, especially in comparison to what I'm used to, which is Dawn of War Ultimate Apocalypse mod. This mod with multiple factions, with multiple unit rosters, with a huge degree of strategy. And one that throws tactical gameplay out the window. So when I saw some of the Dawn of War 2 stuff in there, it was like, I'm not really a big fan. A lot of the customization and the unit templates and these bonuses that you would get from collecting and ranking up I didn't really like. So Dawn of War 3 turned out to be pretty disappointing. Tooth and Tail is a very, very cool console strategy game that I wish I really played more of. It's fast-paced, it's energetic. You have animals for different units, and you can customize them to fit your own individual army. I just wish that was a little bit more expansive, and I'm not going to lie, while I do love the idea of controlling my own units, it'd be really nice if I just played the top-down view and just like sent them out into battle myself. And that would mean that Halo Wars 2 is my favorite. Halo Wars 2 is one of those games where I played a lot of Halo Wars 1, and I went crazy for Halo Wars 2 because I really thought this was going to be the next thing since sliced bread. It turned out that Microsoft really shot the pooch by not getting this on Steam, which is really crazy, and also ending support for it, unfortunately, which really does suck. Had a lot of DLCs come out for it, including one where you can fight against the Flood, which led to mods where you can play as the Flood, which is great. There are mods for Halo Wars 2, they're just very hard to install and stuff like that. And I really did love my time with Halo Wars 2. It's better and bigger than Halo Wars 1 in a lot of ways. It improves upon the game in numerous ways, adding on to the units. I wish there were more upgrades, but it doesn't matter. I just wish there were a little bit more detail into it. Maybe if it was just a full PC game, it would be even much better. But as it stands, Halo Wars 2 is just one of those games where I wish it was better. 2018, we got Northgard, we got They Are Billions. I'll do They Are Billions first. Love the skirmish game, having to survive billions upon billions of zombies, which are actually thousands, but still billions of zombies for days and days at a time is really, really nerve-wracking. And having one mistake turn into a huge wildfire is the most amazing and frustrating gameplay at the same time. It really is one of the hardcore experiences of RTS games that I will keep coming back to if it wasn't for the fact that I just get too pissed off to continue. Now, the campaign is something I just didn't really like in any regard whatsoever. I felt like those resources could have been better put into a better skirmish experience. But as it stands, if you want the quintessential zombie apocalypse defense game, they are billions. 2018 though, I preferred Northgard. This is an RTS game where you play as a couple of Viking clans battling it out. And while the DLC practices for the company I'm not really a big fan of, I don't like buying separate factions, that's really dumb. But I am pretty much okay and completely fine with the base gameplay as it is. It's really cool having to survive in modes like Ragnarok, where you have like giant magma monsters that you have to fight against. You have these civilians that you have to take care of, which can be very quickly changed to whatever job you need them to be. Say a warrior, a priest, a healer, a farmer, or hunter-gatherer. Northgard was just very interesting for that, and the multiplayer as well is fantastic. I do wish that there were a lot more things changed in, more variety of military units, disasters, and threats that you could face off against. Different factions as well that were way different, and also stuff that could maybe justify a DLC purchase. Again, I don't want to buy single purchase DLC factions. It's not good. And we will round out 2019 with Battlefleet Gothic 2 and Anno 1800. Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2. I love the first one, and the second one was more of the same, which is both good and bad. I love the campaign, kind of, except that I felt as though in a lot of sections of the campaign, at the very least, there would be situations where you could get stuck, and it wasn't very clear when you needed to not attack this battle and wait. And also on top of that, finishing a quest and having to attack the fleet that was already guarding the system. A lot of weird things like that. I didn't really much care for the battles as well. I really thought that they would play into the base building aspect of Warhammer Space Battle, but instead what they did was they focused more on the fighting that they did with the first one. Perfect the game in some way, but I just really didn't like the fact that I was just in cruiser clashes with no real purpose, right? Like Empire at War, you had two bases that you had to defend against that could produce units, defend you, and also research stuff. That's not something that is done in Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2, and only focusing on the combat, I feel like the combat itself isn't that detailed to warrant it. Really, there are abilities that you can utilize, different positions that you could take and stuff, but the environment itself is very flat, so what you're left is just 2D ships that are just moving about, really. There are different factions that change up this mechanic, like Necrons, Tyranids, make you have a more interesting experience, which I think is what their focus was having a lot of factions. But it does make them kind of a little bit skin deep. Except for, you know, stuff like the Tyranids and Necrons, which are so aesthetically and way different to their counterparts that they have to be their own categories. I would have preferred an Empire War, basically, of this version of game. Then there's Anno 1800, which ultimately I didn't play a lot of, but I actually ended up liking a lot. A city builder that lets me reenact United States foreign policy by selling weapons to underdeveloped island nations, and then afterwards using those profits to buy out their rum and their liquor. Why, I think it's a brilliant idea, and give me all the chocolate possible that you can have. That would be my picks for 2010 through 2019. And as an honorable mention, 0AD. Play this game. Stop sleeping on it. Give the developers a lot of money. Okay? I'm Masterofroflness. If you want to see more, let me know, and bye-bye.